In the beginning, children acquire new behaviors and modify old behaviors as they encounter their social and physical world. As specific learning experiences accumulate, the child develops, but not in the stage-like way described by Freud and Piaget. The guiding belief of social learning theorists was that personality is learned. They brought the parts of Freudian theory that were testable into the laboratory and ignored the rest. Social learning theorists explored much territory in the 1940s and 1950s, such things as imitation, neuroses, cross-cultural influences on personality, identification, and parental attitudes towards child rearing. Socialization and learning. A major focus of early social learning theory was socialization, the process by which society attempts to teach children to behave like the ideal adults of that society. Research examined correlations between characteristics of parents, for example, authoritarianism, or their child-rearing practices, such as early toilet training, and the child's personality at a later time. Social learning theorists propose that there are important learned drives, such as aggression and dependency. Learned drives are derived from primary biological drives. Thus, the need for food leads to a dependency drive, a need to be near the mother and nurtured by her. The presence of the mother is reinforcing, and the withdrawal of her love, even temporarily in response to a misdeed, is a form of punishment. Reinforcement. A major theoretical change in social learning theory involved imitation. Miller and Dollard in 1941 set out to show that one of the most powerful socialization forces is imitation. They proposed that a general tendency to imitate is learned because various imitative behaviors are reinforced, a process of operant conditioning. Now, Bandura and Walters in 1963 carried the concept of imitation one step further by demonstrating that relatively new behaviors can be acquired by simply watching a model, and the observer need not make an overt response or be reinforced. The punishment or reinforcement of the model's behavior has the same effect on the observer as it does on the model. Children who see a hard-working classmate praised by the teacher learn to try that behavior, and on the side of more negative things, children who get away with naughty behavior are quickly imitated as well. Bandura and Walters called this process vicarious reinforcement. Social cognitive theory. Bandura now calls his theory social cognitive theory and defines learning as knowledge acquisition through cognitive processing of information. He rejects what he calls the radical behaviorist cognitive bypass operation approach, which argues that cognitions can be ignored because they are simply products of external stimuli and therefore redundant with the stimuli in any explanation of behavior. He is less concerned with the literal duplication of behavior, such as imitation, than with observational learning as a more general process of acquiring information from another person, verbally or visually. Social cognition. Regarding social learning theory, Bandura's current theoretical position is becoming increasingly difficult to distinguish from a currently more influential body of current research that's labeled social cognition. And this approach was stimulated by Piaget, Kohlberg, and social attribution theory based on adult social psychology. And this approach, even more than Bandura's, emphasizes the role of cognitive development in social development. The two approaches certainly are compatible. For example, television's effects on children depend on both cognitive and imitative processes. Whether children can comprehend the story, such as infer a protagonist's motives, relate the outcome to an earlier conflict, it affects children's perception of the model and their tendency to imitate it. Learning. At its simplest, learning consists of some sort of association or connection between a stimulus and a response. At its most complex, learning involves acquiring abstract rules or a chain of reasoning. Traditionally, learning has been divided into two types, operant conditions and classical conditioning. Operant conditioning has been most thoroughly explored by B.F. Skinner. And this type of learning begins with the behavior that the child spontaneously produces. he or she operates, so to speak, under the environment. And this behavior becomes conditioned when it comes under the control of a particular stimulus. Classical conditioning begins with a reflex, an innate connection between a stimulus and a response. This response is elicited rather than spontaneously emitted, as in the case in operant conditioning. Social context. Much of the socialization of children involves the shaping of behaviors directed toward other people. Even behaviors that are not social in nature are influenced by the social context in which they occur. Social learning theorists broaden the types of learning to be explained. They saw the importance of observational learning, acquiring new skills or information, or altering old behaviors simply by watching other children and adults. And in fact, Bandura in 1986 made a claim that most learning comes from observational learning and instruction rather than from trial and error type behavior. Imitation of the model's behavior when the model is no longer present is an especially important learning skill. How observational learning occurs is now illustrated by a real-life example in a laboratory study. One skill many boys and girls acquire today is playing soccer, and to a great extent an understanding of the game is acquired through what Bandura would call abstract modeling, known as abstracting a general rule from observing specific behavior. And a child gradually extracts general concepts of group action in the game, such things as team defensive strategy, prediction of where one's teammates will be at a particular moment, strategies concerning how to play one's position, and so on. Vicarious reinforcement is defined as observing that others are reinforced for a particular behavior. This may impart to children the information that the behavior is desirable in that situation and may encourage them to imitate that behavior. Observational learning not only is a process of normal socialization, it also can be a therapy for problem behaviors. For example, observational learning could perhaps help a child overcome specific fears. Although social learning theorists agree that the environment exerts a great deal of influence on behavior, they consider it only one of many forces operating in any situation. The entire learning context includes biological and psychological characteristics of the person, also known as P, the person's behavior, which might be known as B, and the environment, known as E. These three factors are highly interdependent, and each factor influences and is influenced by each of the others. These factors interact via a process that Bandura calls reciprocal determinism. According to Bandura, models mainly influence us by providing information rather than by eliciting matching behavior. Thus, in observational learning, there can be learning without performing the model's behavior even once. There's even evidence that learning can occur or might be best to not occur by direct participation. Watching another person solve a problem may provide a better overall idea of the nature of the problem than, say, being thoroughly immersed in it oneself. A final important way in which Bandura sees cognition as mediating behavior is that self-perceptions influence which available behaviors a person will produce. He emphasizes self-efficacy, such as known as people's perception of their competence in dealing with their environment, and all types of behavior, whether it be academic, social, or recreational, are all affected by self-efficacy. Social learning theorists carefully consider how the particular situation, the child's previous history of observational learning, and the particular content area determine a child's moral judgments. More specifically, social learning theorists account for developmental changes in moral judgments by changes in a child's criteria for judgment, such as intention, clumsiness, amount of damage, and long-range consequences. Also important are a child's personal standards, an adult's prohibitions, expected punishment or reward, and perhaps just peer influence. Moral judgments are expected to be much more variable from time to time and from situation to situation within a social learning framework, more so than within a Piagetian framework. In some situations, the child makes subjective judgments based on intentions, and in other situations makes objective judgments based on amount of damage of something.